The weekend crowd moved lazily through the mall, stopping for snacks, small shopping bags, and the occasional window display. Near the center of the building, where a small stage had been set up for live performances, people began to gather. Some came because they recognized the young pianist who played there every few weeks. Others simply followed the sound of music drifting through the wide, bright space. The pianist, a cheerful man named Adrian, had a habit of mixing humor with his performances. He loved to play, but he also loved to make people laugh. While performing, he often cracked jokes, teased the audience in harmless ways, and made the entire event feel warm and relaxed. That afternoon, he was especially energetic, chatting with the crowd between songs, telling little stories, and encouraging people to shout song requests. Just in front of the stage sat a quiet woman named Lena. She had come to the mall only to buy a notebook for work, but the sound of the piano had pulled her in. She stopped near the chairs, thinking she might listen for a few minutes before heading home. But something about the music kept her rooted in place. It wasn't just the tunes or Adrian's upbeat personality. It was the simple joy he seemed to have while playing. Lina did not stand out much. She dressed plainly, wore glasses, and kept her hair tied loosely behind her head. She wasn't the type to push forward or draw attention. She usually preferred to blend into the background, finding comfort in quiet corners and unnoticed spaces. Even now, as she listened, she sat with her hands folded neatly on her lap, careful not to draw any attention. After finishing a lively piece, Adrian pushed his stool back slightly and grinned at the crowd. "All right," he said, wiping his forehead jokingly. "I need a little break before my fingers fall off." The audience chuckled. He looked around, scanning the front rows. His gaze landed on Lena for just a moment, then on the people around her, then back to her. She sat straight, looking attentive, but not overly excited, which somehow made her stand out even more. "You look like you're really paying attention," he said, pointing toward Lena with a friendly smile. It took her a few seconds to realize he meant her. She glanced around, almost hoping someone else would respond. "Yes, you," he said with a light laugh. "You've been sitting there so quietly that I think you might actually be plotting to steal my job." A few people nearby laughed. Lena felt her cheeks warm, but she managed a small, polite smile. Adrian continued, "Tell you what, how about you come up here and try a few notes? Just for fun." The suggestion floated in the air for a moment. Some audience members clapped softly, encouragingly. Others leaned forward in curiosity. Lena blinked, unsure how to respond. "Oh no, I'm fine here," she said quickly, her voice gentle but nervous. "Come on," Adrian insisted playfully. "I promise I won't make you play anything fancy. Just a few keys. You know, like testing a piano before buying it." The crowd laughed again. Adrian's tone was light-hearted, clearly joking more than expecting her to accept. He often invited people on stage as a way to tease the audience, but most would wave it off. He didn't truly expect anyone shy-looking to say yes, but something about the moment tugged at Lina. She wasn't entirely sure why. Maybe it was the warm way the audience looked at her. Maybe it was the gentle humor in Adrian's voice. Maybe it was the music itself, stirring something inside her that she had pushed away long ago. Her heart beat a little faster. She could easily say no again, and no one would question it. She could stay seated, quiet, comfortable. That was her usual choice. But for some reason, she felt a small pull, a strange nudge. She didn't fully understand. Adrian raised both his hands in a dramatic, pleading gesture. "Please, just for a moment? I swear I'll keep it simple." The people around her clapped a bit louder this time. A few smiled at her with encouragement rather than pressure. It was friendly, supportive. Taking a breath, Lena stood. She did it before her mind even had time to argue with her. The small applause that followed surprised her. It wasn't loud or overwhelming. It was gentle, as if the crowd understood her hesitance and appreciated her courage. She walked toward the stage slowly, trying to ignore the fluttery feeling in her stomach. Adrian stepped aside and held out a hand to help her up the 2 small steps. She accepted it, careful not to trip. Once she reached the top, she could feel hundreds of eyes on her, even if it was only a few dozen. It felt like hundreds. "All right," Adrian said in a playful announcer voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a brave volunteer. Let's give her a warm welcome." The crowd applauded again, and Lena tried to smile, though her hands felt cold. Adrian patted the bench lightly. "Go ahead. Take a seat." She sat down slowly, almost mechanically. The piano keys stretched in front of her like a long row of fragile teeth, right under the mall's lights. Her heartbeat thudded loudly in her ears. Adrian leaned over her shoulder, still smiling. "Don't worry. You can press any key you want. There's no wrong answer here. Just have fun with it." The words were meant to relax her, but instead, something tightened inside her chest memories she hadn't touched in years. The soft weight of old music books, the smell of polished wood, the steady rhythm of practice that had once filled her evenings. She tried to push the thoughts away. This wasn't the time for remembering. She just needed to tap a few keys, laugh it off, and return to her seat. The bench felt both familiar and strange. Her hands rested on her knees, hesitant to move closer to the keyboard. The soft murmur of the crowd washed over her, quiet, expectant, patient. "Whenever you're ready," Adrian said. She nodded, though she wasn't ready at all. She lifted her hands slowly, as if they were heavier than usual, and hovered them above the keys. Her fingers trembled slightly. She reminded herself she didn't have to play anything real. She could press 1 key, 2 keys, anything. That would be enough. From somewhere deep inside her memory, a tiny echo surfaced, a feeling more than a thought, a whisper of something she had buried for a long time. She didn't fully understand why it appeared now, here, in the middle of a public mall. But it filled her chest with an odd mixture of warmth and ache. She pressed a single key. A soft sound rang out. Simple, harmless. She exhaled slowly. The crowd watched. Adrian waited with an easy, patient smile. No pressure, no expectation. But Lena felt something shift inside her. Something small but unmistakable. It was like touching the surface of an old memory and finding it still alive beneath the dust. Her fingers rested lightly on the keys now, no longer trembling. The cold feeling in her hands began to fade, replaced by something else, something familiar. She didn't know what she was going to do next. She didn't plan it. It simply began forming in her mind, like a pattern she remembered without consciously recalling it. Adrian noticed a slight change in her posture. His smile dimmed slightly, not in disappointment, but in curiosity. He leaned back a little, sensing that something unexpected might be happening. Lena pressed another key, softer this time. Then a third. They weren't random. Not quite a melody, but close enough that Adrian raised an eyebrow. The audience leaned in, sensing the shift even if they couldn't explain it. Lena sat straighter. Her shoulders relaxed, and the tension in her jaw softened. The keys under her fingers no longer felt like strangers. They felt like something she used to know. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, a small moment, but long enough for the world around her to fade just slightly. In that tiny pause, the past brushed against her again. The quiet room where she used to practice. The sound of rain outside the window while she worked on difficult passages. The soft voice that once encouraged her, telling her she could be great. She took a long, slow breath. The audience went completely silent. Adrian's playful expression shifted into one of anticipation. though he didn't fully understand why. When Lena opened her eyes, they held a calm she didn't feel before. A calm that came from somewhere deep inside, deeper than fear, deeper than nervousness. She placed both hands gently on the keys, her fingers naturally finding positions she hadn't used in years. And then she paused again. A moment stretched between her and the piano was still. Quiet connection. No one yet knew what she was about to do. Not even Lena herself. But the air around her felt different now, like the soft quiet before a storm. The crowd waited. Adrian waited. Lena breathed in once more, steady and full. Her fingers were ready to move. Lena sat on the bench with both hands resting gently on the piano keys. The air around her felt suspended, as if the whole mall had paused to see what she might do next. She didn't look at the audience, and she didn't glance back at Adrian. Her eyes were fixed on the keys, but her mind was far away, drifting into a place she hadn't allowed herself to visit in a long time. She could almost hear the soft ticking of the old metronome her family used to keep on the shelf beside the piano. She remembered how she used to watch its tiny metal arm move back and forth while practicing. Back then, music had been a big part of her life. It wasn't just a skill. It was something that helped her breathe, helped her understand the world, helped her feel safe. But that was a long time ago. She swallowed gently, trying to steady the little tremble in her chest. She wasn't even sure why her hands had moved into the position they were in. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was something deeper, something she didn't want to name just yet. Adrian stood a few steps behind her, his expression now more thoughtful than playful. He sensed something shifting in the atmosphere, but he didn't interrupt. For the first time all afternoon, he didn't crack a joke or make a comment. He simply watched. The crowd, too, had quieted to complete stillness. No rustling bags. No whispered conversations. Even the children nearby had become strangely calm. Sensing the tension or curiosity in the air, Lena pressed the first note soft, gentle, almost like testing the temperature of water. It rang out cleanly and faded into silence. She pressed another note, this time with her other hand. Together, they formed the beginning of something she didn't fully plan. Her breath deepened. She felt a familiar warmth spreading slowly through her arms and shoulders, melting away the stiffness. Her fingers moved again, forming small patterns, tiny shapes of sound that came naturally to her. Not a full melody, yet just the opening steps of one. She didn't understand why she was doing it. She didn't intend to play anything real. But it was as if her hands had waited for this moment. Waited for years. Adrian's eyebrows rose slightly. He knew enough about music to understand when someone was just tapping keys for fun, and when someone had real control. These weren't random notes. They were slow, cautious, but thoughtful. Everyone could feel it. Lena felt something inside her chest shift softly, like a door opening just a crack. With that small opening came a mixture of emotions: sadness, hope, fear, comfort, all tangled together. But she didn't pull her hands away. She didn't stand up. She didn't retreat. Instead, she played one more note and then another. Gradually, the small pattern of sound began to grow. Not loud or bold, but steady and gentle, like a whisper carried by a breeze. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, she stopped. Her fingers hovered above the keys. Her back stiffened. She blinked as if waking from a dream. A tiny gasp rose from someone in the audience, but no one moved otherwise. Adrian leaned a little forward, careful not to disturb her concentration. Lena took a shaky breath and slowly lowered her hands to her lap. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrian stepped closer. "Sorry? Why?" She shook her head lightly, unable to explain the mix of things she felt. It wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't regret. It was something that felt like standing at the edge of a memory too powerful to step into fully. "You don't have to be nervous," Adrian said gently, softening his tone. "Really, that sounded beautiful." Lena looked up at him quickly, almost startled. "I wasn't trying to play anything," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. "I know," he replied, "but you still did." She looked down again. Her fingers twitched slightly, as if they wanted to return to the keys. She kept them still. The audience remained silent, not out of impatience, but from curiosity and respect. They could feel there was a story behind this moment, something unseen but important. Adrian gave the crowd a light glance, then turned back to her. "If you want," he said softly, "you can play more. No pressure. Only if you want to." She hesitated. The thought of playing more made her heart flutter with both excitement and fear. She didn't know if she was ready for that. She had spent so many years avoiding pianos, avoiding anything that reminded her of what she once had and lost. But the keys were right there, and the warmth in her hands was growing stronger. Lena lifted her right hand first, slowly. She let her fingertip touch one key, then the next, creating a tiny sequence of soft tones. Something inside her responded with a small pulse, like a spark waking up. Her left hand followed, touching the keys gently. The first notes came out quiet and cautious. A few people in the audience leaned forward instinctively, sensing what might be coming. Lena's breathing steadied. Her shoulders relaxed. The tension in her neck began to fade. It felt as though the piano itself was pulling her closer, inviting her to say something she'd kept silent for too long. She played another few notes. This time they connected more clearly. They were no longer just random touches. They were forming the outline of a melody she used to know by heart. But just as the melody began to take shape, she stopped again. Her hands froze mid-air. Her eyes widened slightly, and a shadow of worry flickered across her expression. She quickly pulled her hands back to her lap, her breath catching. "I can't," she whispered. Adrian stepped a little closer, keeping his voice gentle. "It's all right. You don't have to." She shook her head again, not in refusal, but in conflict. She wasn't afraid of the audience. She wasn't afraid of Adrian. She was afraid of what would happen if she kept going, afraid of the memories that would come rushing back. The melody she had started was one she used to play for someone important, someone who wasn't here anymore. And even touching the beginning of it felt like opening an old wound. "I haven't played in a long time," she said finally, her voice trembling just slightly. "You don't have to explain," Adrian said softly. "I think everyone here can tell this means something to you." She nodded, but her eyes stayed on the piano, not on him. After a long moment, she placed her hands back on the bench, not on the keys, just near them. The audience waited patiently, still completely silent. Lena felt her heartbeat slow, and the weight inside her chest shifted once more. She wasn't ready to play fully, not yet, but she also didn't want to run away. Something about the moment felt too important to walk away from. She straightened her posture slightly and looked toward the crowd for the first time. Their faces were soft, patient, warm. No one was judging her. No one was laughing. They were simply waiting to see what she would do. Her eyes drifted back to the piano. She slowly lifted her right hand and pressed a single note, then another. She let the sounds ring out, each one giving her a little more courage. She wasn't ready for a full melody. She wasn't ready to let her hands glide freely like they used to. But she could play simple notes. She could let herself feel this moment without rushing. Adrian smiled, understanding. He stepped back slightly so she had space. Lena allowed her left hand to join in again, creating a gentle pattern of soft, steady notes. The tune wasn't familiar. It wasn't a real piece. But it was hers, something she was forming in the moment. and something inside her responded, something warm, something fragile but hopeful. She didn't notice how long she played. It wasn't long, but it wasn't short either. She continued until the weight in her chest felt just a little lighter, until her breathing grew easier, until she felt a tiny spark of calm settle inside her. When she finally stopped, the sound faded slowly. She lifted her hands from the keys with care, as if placing something precious back where she found it. The audience waited for her to finish fully. Only when she lowered her hands to her lap did they respond. A soft wave of applause rose, gentle, respectful, warm. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was careful, as if they understood how delicate the moment had been. Lena looked up, surprised. She hadn't expected applause for such simple playing. Adrian stood beside her, smiling with genuine admiration. "That," he said softly, "was beautiful." She looked at him, unsure of what to say. "You have something special," he continued. "I don't know what your story is, but I can tell you. Your hands remember." Lena blinked, her eyes warming slightly, not tears, just emotion. Deep, quiet emotion. She stood up slowly from the bench. Her legs felt a little shaky, but she stayed balanced. Someone in the audience called out gently, "That was lovely." Others nodded, smiling warmly at her. She gave a small, shy wave, then stepped away from the piano. Adrian extended a hand to help her down from the stage, and she accepted it. As soon as her feet touched the floor again, she felt herself exhale a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She returned to her seat, aware of eyes still watching her, but no longer feeling afraid of them. She wasn't sure what had just happened, or what it meant for her, or why it had felt so important. But one thing was clear. Something inside her had been stirred awake, and it wasn't going to fade so easily. Lena sat in her seat long after the soft applause faded and the next portion of the event began. Though the crowd's attention shifted back to Adrian, who returned to the piano with a fresh joke and a cheerful grin, Lena felt as if she were still on the stage. Her hands rested on her lap, but she could still feel the smooth surface of the keys beneath her fingertips. Still hear the faint echo of the notes she had played. The mall bustled around her again, people walking, conversation starting up, children pointing at nearby shops, but she felt strangely removed from it all. Everything seemed a little softer, a little quieter, as if her mind were wrapped in a thin layer of memory. Adrian continued playing upbeat songs, tapping his foot and encouraging the crowd to clap along. He was back in his usual rhythm, but every now and then he glanced at Lena, not in a distracting way, not in a way that drew attention to her. It was more like he wanted to make sure she was all right. Or maybe he was just curious about the quiet storm he sensed in her earlier. Lena appreciated that he didn't point her out again or try to force another moment. She didn't want more attention. What she had done already felt overwhelming enough. Still, she couldn't deny that something inside her had shifted. Something she had kept locked away for years had stirred awake, stretching and breathing for the first time in what felt like forever. She closed her eyes for a moment and let the music wash over her. But instead of listening to what Adrian was playing, her mind kept drifting back to a small room with sunlight streaming through the window. A wooden piano bench slightly too tall for her feet. A soft voice encouraging her when she missed a note. Gentle laughter when she tried again and got it right. She opened her eyes quickly, pushing the thoughts away. She didn't want to fall into them too deeply here, in public, surrounded by strangers. After a few more songs, Adrian took another short break. The audience applauded, and some people wandered off to grab snacks or check out nearby stores. A few children ran to the edge of the stage, asking Adrian questions about the piano, which he answered happily. Lena stood from her seat, feeling the need to move. Her legs felt stiff, as if she had been sitting in the same position for hours rather than minutes. She walked away from the stage, weaving gently through the crowd, aiming for the quieter side of the mall. She wasn't running away. She just needed space to breathe. This side of the mall was calmer, with fewer people and softer lighting. She walked past a small cafe, past a store selling handcrafted items, past a wide set of windows where natural light streamed in. She finally stopped near a bench tucked against the wall and sat down. From here, she couldn't hear the music clearly anymore. It was just a faint murmur in the background, blending with the sounds of footsteps and distant chatter. She rested her hands on her knees again, looking down at them. They didn't shake now. They felt warm, steady, alive, almost. She hadn't felt that way in a long time. A memory tugged at her again. Not a painful one, at least not fully. It was gentle, quiet. A memory of someone sitting beside her at the piano, correcting her posture with soft hands. Laughing when she complained about a piece being too hard. She blinked it away. Not ready to face the full picture just yet. Thought I might find you here. Lena turned, startled. Adrian stood a few steps away, holding 2 small paper cups from the nearby cafe. "Oh," she said softly. "I didn't expect." He smiled lightly. "You left pretty quickly after the break." "I just wanted to make sure you were okay." She nodded. "I'm fine. I just needed some air." "That's understandable," he said. "Mind if I sit?" She shook her head, so he took a seat next to her, leaving a comfortable amount of space. He handed her one of the cups. "It's just warm tea. Nothing fancy." She accepted it with a quiet thank you. The warmth felt good in her hands. For a moment, neither of them spoke. People walked by, minding their own business. The mall announcements played faintly overhead. Life continued normally, but the air between them felt gentle, calm. "You play beautifully," Adrian said finally. Lena looked down at the teacup. "I didn't really play anything." He shook his head. "Even the small things you played? They weren't random. You've had training. A lot of it." She didn't reply right away. She wasn't sure how much she wanted to share. "Sorry," he added softly. "If that's personal, I didn't mean to pry. It's all right." She took a slow sip of tea. "I used to play. A long time ago." He waited, not pushing, just listening. She breathed in deeply, then spoke. "My family used to have a piano. It was the first thing I ever learned properly. I practiced almost every day, even when I didn't want to." She smiled faintly at the memory. "Did you stop because you lost interest?" Adrian asked gently. She shook her head slowly. "No, I loved it, more than anything, but things changed." He didn't ask what. He simply nodded. "That's why I didn't want to play today," she added softly. "It's been years. I didn't think I could even touch the keys without feeling everything again." Adrian leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "I understand, even if I don't know the whole story." She appreciated that he didn't press her for details. It made it easier to keep talking. "When you called me up there," she said quietly, "I was terrified. I almost said no again. But then something inside me, I don't know, it just pushed me to stand." He smiled. "You did more than stand." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "It wasn't anything big." "It was," he said. "You don't realize how the whole atmosphere changed when you touched the piano." Everyone felt it. Even the kids who had been talking nonstop suddenly went quiet. She wasn't sure what to say to that. "You surprised me," he added. "In a good way. A very good way." Lena felt her cheeks warm a little. She took another sip of her tea to hide it. After a moment of silence, Adrian spoke again. "If you ever want to play again, even just simple notes like earlier, you're welcome to come back. I can give you time on the stage after my set, or before, or whenever you feel ready." She looked at him quickly, surprised. "I don't think I could." "No pressure," he said quickly, raising his hands. "I'm not asking you to perform. I'm not trying to put you in front of a crowd again. I just mean, if touching the piano felt good for you, even a little, then I'd be happy to make space for you to try again. Just for yourself." She looked down at her cup, feeling something warm bloom in her chest, not from the tea, but from his kindness. "I'll think about it," she said. "That's all I ask." He smiled. They sat in silence again. Not awkward silence, soft silence. After a while, Adrian stood. "I should get back. I have a few more songs before the event ends." She nodded. "Thank you for the tea." "Anytime," he said. "And remember, no pressure." He gave her a small wave and walked back toward the stage. Lena watched him go, feeling a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. She wasn't sure what she wanted. She wasn't sure what the memory of the piano meant for her now. But she did know that the spark she felt earlier hadn't gone out. After she finished her tea, she walked slowly back toward the main area. Adrian was already on stage again, reconnecting with the audience effortlessly. He played another energetic tune, making the crowd clap along. Lena stayed near the back this time, not wanting to draw attention. She leaned gently against a pillar and listened. She felt calmer, now steady, grounded. As she watched him play, she noticed something small. Adrian kept glancing around subtly, as if checking whether she had returned. When he spotted her in the back, he gave a tiny nod, barely noticeable, but definitely intentional. She smiled softly. For the first time in years, she felt connected to something she had long believed she lost. Not just music, but the version of herself that once felt strong, expressive, and hopeful. She didn't know where this would lead, but part of her wanted to find out. When the final song ended and the crowd gave one last applause, Lena stayed where she was until the noise settled. People began leaving, chatting happily about their day. Adrian packed up his sheet music and greeted a few people who came to compliment his performance. Someone asked about beginner piano lessons, and he talked with them for a moment. Lena watched quietly, not ready to approach him again, but not ready to leave either. As he stepped off the stage, he glanced toward the back, searching for her. Their eyes met briefly, and he smiled. She gave a small nod before turning to leave. Not because she wanted to walk away from the moment, but because she needed time to think about everything. As she walked toward the mall exit, she felt light, not free from the past, not healed all at once, but open in a way she hadn't been in years. The memory of the piano followed her gently, not like a burden, but like a hand reaching out. And for the first time, she felt ready to reach back. Lena woke the next morning with a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't excitement exactly, and it wasn't fear. It was something softer, something quieter, like a gentle tap on the inside of her chest, reminding her of yesterday's unexpected moment. She lay still for a while, staring at the ceiling, letting the memory of the piano keys wash over her. She could still feel the smoothness beneath her fingertips. She could still hear the quiet notes she'd played. She could still sense the way her heart had opened just a little, like a locked window pushed ajar. She hadn't planned on letting music back into her life. It happened by accident, by surprise, by a simple joke from a cheerful pianist she didn't even know. And yet, that small moment had changed something. She wasn't sure what, but she knew she couldn't ignore it. After getting ready for the day, she made herself a warm drink and sat by her small kitchen window. Outside, the morning light stretched across the buildings and rooftops, soft and golden. She watched people walking on the street below, heading to their jobs, their errands, their routines. Her own routine had always been simple work at the bookstore. Come home, read a little, sleep, repeat. It wasn't a bad life. It was peaceful, predictable. But yesterday reminded her that she used to have something else inside her. Something more vibrant. She finished her drink, grabbed her bag, and headed out. The walk to the bookstore took about 20 minutes. Usually, she passed the time by listening to soft music or audiobooks. But today, she didn't play anything. She wanted silence, wanted space for her thoughts. As she walked, she found herself tapping her fingers lightly against her thigh in a slow pattern. At first, she didn't notice. It was an unconscious movement. But after a few steps, she paused mid-tap and looked down at her hand. Her fingers were playing out the tiny melody she had started yesterday. She quickly pulled her hands still. The realization made her breath hitch a little. Her mind had remembered what her heart hadn't dared to revisit. She pushed the thought away and kept walking. When she reached the bookstore, she opened the door and was greeted by the familiar smell of paper and ink. The little bell above the door jingled. Her coworker, a cheerful older woman named Rena, waved from behind the counter. "Good morning," Rena said with her usual warm smile. "Morning," Lena replied, setting her bag down. "You look bright today," Rena commented. "Something good happen?" Lena hesitated. She wasn't used to sharing much about her personal life. "Not really," she said softly, then added, "I just heard some music yesterday." "Ah," Rena said knowingly. "Music can do that to you." Lena nodded and went to arrange a stack of new arrivals. She took her time lining up the books neatly, but her mind wasn't fully on the task. A few minutes later, as she was shelving romance novels, her phone buzzed. She quickly checked it, expecting maybe a message from a colleague or a reminder she'd set. But instead, it was a message from an unknown number. "Hope you're having a good morning. It's Adrian from the mall. Just wanted to say thanks again for yesterday. You made the whole event special in a way none of us expected." Lina froze for a second. She hadn't expected him to reach out. She wasn't even sure how he got her number. Oh, she remembered giving it when he offered her tea and asked how she liked it. She must have said it without thinking. She stared at the message for a long moment. Her first instinct was to not reply. Not because she didn't appreciate it, but because conversations like this felt unfamiliar, uncertain. But after a minute, she typed back, "Thank you. Yesterday just happened unexpectedly. I'm glad it meant something." She reread it twice before sending. Simple, polite, safe. A moment later, her phone buzzed again. It meant a lot. "And I meant what I said. If you ever want a quiet moment with the piano, you're welcome any time. No audience. No pressure." The offer made her chest tighten in a strange mix of warmth and fear. She tucked her phone away and tried to focus on work again, but every few minutes, her thoughts drifted to the stage, to the keys, to the way her hands had moved on their own. By midday, when the store was quiet and Rena stepped out for lunch, Lena found herself sitting behind the counter, staring at nothing. She didn't know why her heart felt so uneasy, or why it felt like something inside her wanted to go somewhere, do something, move. She sighed softly. She wasn't ready to go back to the mall. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But the thought lingered. When her shift ended, she walked home slowly. The sky was painted with soft shades of orange and pink. People laughed outside restaurants. Parents pushed strollers. Young couples shared snacks on benches. Life went on around her, full and colorful. She wondered if her life could be full again, too. If music could ever be a part of her world the way it used to be. When she reached her apartment, she noticed something she hadn't paid attention to in years. The small box tucked on the top shelf of her closet. She took it down carefully and set it on her bed. Inside were old sheet music, handwritten notes, and a warm metronome that hadn't clicked in ages. Her breath caught in her throat. She lifted the top sheet, piece she had once practiced endlessly. The edges were slightly torn from years of use. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the pages. Her hands trembled slightly as she touched the notes on the page. She felt the weight of memory settle on her shoulders, but this time it wasn't crushing. It was heavy, but it was familiar. A soft knock pulled her out of her thoughts. She looked toward the door. Who could that be? She wasn't expecting anyone. She stood slowly, walked to the door, and opened it. Adrian stood there, holding a small music book in one hand and wearing a sheepish smile. "Hi," he said, lifting the book slightly. "I hope this isn't weird. I know the mall isn't far from here, and I was passing by on my way home. I just wanted to give you this. No pressure to open it. I just thought you might like it." Lena blinked, stunned. She hadn't expected to see him again so soon. "You didn't have to come all the way here?" she said softly. "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to." She couldn't help but notice how nervous he seemed. It wasn't overwhelming or uncomfortable. It was genuine. She stepped aside slightly. "You can come in for a moment if you'd like." He hesitated, then nodded and stepped inside. He looked around politely, taking in her small but cozy apartment. "It's a nice place," he said. "Thank you." He handed her the book. She looked at it carefully. It wasn't classical music. It was a collection of simple, calming pieces, soft melodies, gentle harmonies, nothing too difficult. Pieces meant to reconnect someone with the piano slowly. "It's not meant to push you," he said quickly. "Just something friendly to have around. Something easy. Something warm." She ran her fingers along the cover. The gesture brought a soft ache to her chest. "You really think I could play again?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer immediately. He seemed to think carefully before speaking. "I think," he said slowly, "that your hands remember more than you realize. And I think your heart does too. You don't have to play anything big. You don't have to perform. But if music was ever something you loved, you deserve to have it back, even a little." Her throat tightened. She lowered her gaze. "I'm scared," she admitted. "It's okay to be scared," he replied gently. The room felt still, warm, honest. After a moment, Adrian took a small step back toward the door. "I should let you rest," he said. "I didn't mean to interrupt your evening." "You didn't," she said quickly. He paused, surprised by her tone. She felt her face warm. "I mean, thank you," she added softly. "Really." He smiled. "Anytime." He opened the door to leave, then turned whilst time. "If you ever decide you want to visit the piano again, I'll be there. And if not, that's all right too." She nodded. After he left, she closed the door gently and leaned against it for a long moment. Her heart was beating too fast. Her thoughts were tangled. She carried the music book back to her room and sat on the bed again. For a long time, she didn't open it. She just held it. Eventually, she placed it beside the old sheet music in the box. The new and the old sat side by side, like two parts of her life, quietly meeting for the first time. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know if she could ever sit at a piano again, the way she once did. But she did know one thing. The door inside her, once locked tight, was now cracked open, and she wasn't rushing to close it. Lena woke up earlier than usual the next morning, though she hadn't meant to. The light was still soft outside, barely touching the buildings across from her window. She lay still for a moment, trying to understand why she felt so awake, so alert. It wasn't a feeling she often had. Her mornings were normally quiet and slow, marked by routine and stillness. But today felt different in a way she couldn't explain. Her eyes drifted toward the small box on her bedside table, the box she had opened the night before. The old sheet music still peeked out from the top, and beside it, the new music book Adrian had given her rested neatly. She didn't reach for it. Not yet. She simply looked at it, feeling a gentle pull in her chest that both comforted and unsettled her. After getting up, she washed her face, made herself a warm drink, and stood by the window. The world outside was slowly waking up. Cars hummed by, people walked with hurried steps, and shop owners began opening their doors. Life moved steadily. As she sipped her drink, she wondered if today she should go to the mall. The idea came quietly, like a soft tap in her mind. She tried brushing it aside, but it returned again. She placed her cup down. No, she couldn't just show up. She wouldn't know what to say or what to do, and she wasn't ready to play anything. Not in public. Not even in private. Still, she hadn't stopped thinking about the piano since yesterday. She left the window and got dressed for work. Her steps felt a little heavier today, not from sadness, but from the weight of indecision. During the walk to the bookstore, she found herself looking at her hands again. Her fingers moved without her thinking, repeating that same tiny melody that had reawakened in her the day before. It was almost like her hands were trying to guide her somewhere, remind her of something she wasn't ready to face. When she reached the bookstore, Rena greeted her with her usual smile. "Good morning." Rena said. "Morning," Lena replied. "You look thoughtful today." Rena added with a curious tilt of her head. "Just thinking." Lena murmured. "About the music again?" Lena paused. "Maybe." Rena smiled knowingly. "You know, sometimes something from our past comes back because it isn't done with us yet." Lena blinked. She hadn't expected such a simple yet piercing statement. Rena always had a way of understanding more than people told her. She spent the rest of the morning shelving books, helping customers, and organizing displays. But her mind wandered every few minutes. She tried focusing on tasks to distract herself, but it didn't work. At lunchtime, she sat in the small back room with her sandwich. She wasn't hungry, but she forced herself to eat at least a few bites. Her phone buzzed gently on the table. She expected another polite message from Adrian, but it was just a reminder from her work schedule. She set the phone down and leaned back in her chair, feeling restless. Adrian hadn't messaged her since last night. She wasn't sure if that made her relieved or disappointed. The day moved slowly. When her shift finally ended, she walked home with the same thoughts circling in her mind. Should she go to the mall? By the time she reached her building, she felt no closer to an answer. She stepped inside, set her bag down, and sat on her bed. The music book sat where she had left it. She sighed, reached for it, and opened it. The first piece was incredibly simple, almost childlike in its softness. It didn't demand skill. It didn't require strength. It only asked for presence. She traced the notes lightly. She could play this. She knew she could. Even after all this time, something inside her remembered, but she didn't have a piano at home. She closed the book gently, her heart beating a little faster. Before she fully realized what she was doing, she grabbed her bag again, slipped on her shoes, and stepped out of her apartment. Her feet moved before her mind made the decision. She walked down the block, past 2 corners, crossed a street, and kept going. She didn't stop until she reached the entrance of the mall. She didn't understand why she was there. She didn't have a plan. She didn't even know if Adrian would be there. Maybe he had the day off. Maybe he had gone home early. Maybe he wasn't expecting her at all. But she was here. She stepped inside. The building was bright and full of chatter. The sound of footsteps echoed, a blend of voices mixing together. People walked past her carrying shopping bags and snacks. Children laughed as they ran ahead of their parents. The atmosphere was lively. She took a slow, deep breath Then she walked toward the stage. The piano sat where it always did, a simple dark instrument placed under soft lights. A small group of people were listening to a young man playing. His music was lively, cheerful, and confident. Lina stood at a distance, watching. She wondered if she should turn around and go home. She wondered what she was doing here. But her feet didn't move. When the young man finished his song, the small crowd clapped politely. He stood, bowed lightly, and stepped away from the piano. Lina's breath caught. What if Adrian wasn't here? What if she had come for nothing? Should she ask someone? Should she leave? Before she could decide, she heard a familiar voice behind her. You came. She turned. Adrian stood a few steps away, his expression calm but warm, as if he had been hoping just a little that she would appear. Lina felt her face flush. I didn't plan to, she said softly. I was just walking. And your feet brought you here, he said gently. She nodded awkwardly. Do you want to sit? He asked, motioning toward a nearby bench. She nodded again. They sat together, the piano in front of them, the mall moving around them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Adrian said quietly, You don't have to play. I'm glad you're here, with or without the music. Her heart tightened at his words. I don't know why I came, she admitted. Maybe you don't need to know yet, he replied. Sometimes we take steps before we understand them. They sat in silence for a little while. The soft hum of the mall blended with the faint notes of someone testing the piano. Lina looked at her hands folded in her lap. Do you think the music will feel the same? She asked quietly. Adrian didn't answer immediately. I think it might feel different, he said. But different doesn't mean worse. Sometimes it means deeper. Lina swallowed. She wasn't sure she was ready to play anything. She wasn't sure she was ready to touch the keys again. But she was sitting here. She had come all this way. Adrian stood up slowly. Would you like some time alone with it? He asked softly. Her breath caught again. Alone? I can ask the others to give the stage a break for a bit, he said. Just a few minutes. If you want. She hesitated. I don't know, she whispered. That's okay, he said. Take your time. He didn't pressure her. He didn't ask her again. He simply sat back beside her, offering quiet company. After a long pause, Lina closed her eyes. She could feel her heartbeat steady, unsure, hopeful. Finally, she whispered, maybe. A little time alone. Just to sit. Adrian nodded and stood. I'll clear it for you. She watched him walk toward the small group near the piano. He spoke gently with them, smiling politely. They nodded, gathering their things, and stepped away from the stage. The piano was empty now. Waiting. Adrian returned and gave her a small, encouraging smile. It's yours for a while. No one will come close unless you want them to. Lina took a deep breath. Her legs felt heavy as she stood. She walked slowly toward the piano, each step echoing more loudly in her chest than in the space around her. She reached the bench. She didn't sit. She just stood there for a moment, staring at the keys, feeling the memories swirl around her. She lifted her hand slightly, but she didn't touch the piano, not yet. She sat down gently, her fingers hovering over the keys without pressing them. The first touch would mean something. It would open something. She wasn't sure she was ready. Behind her, from a distance, Adrian waited silently, respectfully, giving her space. She closed her eyes, placing her hands lightly on the cool keys. And for the first time in years, she pressed down, letting a single note ring softly into the air. The sound was quiet, simple, delicate, and yet it spread through her like a warm breath. She exhaled shakily and played another note, then another. Lina sat at the piano for a long moment, after those first few notes faded into the air. Her hands rested lightly on the keys, almost afraid to move again. The sound had been so soft, so delicate, yet it echoed inside her like a whisper from a part of herself she thought had disappeared. She breathed slowly, letting the moment settle. The mall continued to hum in the background voices. Footsteps, distant laughter, but none of it felt close. It was as if the world had stepped back to give her space. She pressed another note, this one slightly firmer. It rang clearer, warmer, and something inside her loosened a little, like a knot gently coming undone. She didn't try to play a full melody. She didn't try to recall the complex pieces she once knew. Instead, she pressed single notes one at a time, letting each one rise and fall like little steps, leading her somewhere. She wasn't sure where she was going, but she didn't stop. A simple pattern formed, slow and uneven, but honest. Her hands moved carefully, searching. Some notes felt right, some didn't, but she didn't judge herself. She just let the music come the way it wanted to. Behind her, Adrian stood at a respectful distance. He didn't speak, didn't move closer. He simply watched, not with curiosity, but with quiet encouragement. After a few minutes, Lena paused. Her hands hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. She whispered to herself, "I can't believe I'm doing this." She didn't mean it in fear. She meant it in wonder. She looked up and noticed someone walking by slow their steps. The woman smiled softly at Lena, not in a way that demanded anything, but in the way someone smiles when they witness something gentle. Then the woman moved on, not stopping, not staring. Lena realized something important. Nobody was expecting anything from her. No pressure, no judgment. No wait. She could simply be here. She pressed another note. Then, without thinking, her right hand moved to form a tiny melody, one she had practiced long ago. A melody so simple she could play it even in the dark. It was a lullaby. It was soft, warm, filled with quiet emotion. The notes floated out like fragile threads weaving through the air. Her breath caught. She hadn't expected her hands to remember that tune. She hadn't even thought about it. But there it was, rising gently from the piano. As she played, memories surfaced, not painful ones, but warm ones. Afternoons spent practicing by the window. Evenings filled with soft music drifting through the house. Moments when she felt connected to something bigger than herself. She kept playing. The melody grew a little fuller. Her left hand joined, not perfectly, but enough to hold the tune. She wasn't performing. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was remembering who she had been. And who she still was. The mall seemed to quiet around her. Not silent, but softened. A few people paused nearby, listening with peaceful expressions. Not a crowd. Just a few souls drawn by the gentle sound. For a moment, Lena felt like she was floating. When she finally stopped, the last note lingered in the air before dissolving into the space around her. Her hands fell into her lap. She didn't realize she was breathing fast until her chest rose and fell with each shaky breath. Adrian stepped forward slowly, careful not to break the fragile atmosphere. "That was beautiful," he said softly. Lena looked down, overwhelmed. "It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be," he replied. "It was real." She closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. Real. Maybe that was what she had needed all along, to feel the music without fear, without pressure. She stood slowly from the bench. Her legs were a little unsteady, but her heart felt unexpectedly light. Adrian walked beside her as she stepped away from the piano. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, just..." "Surprised? By what?" "That it didn't hurt," she said quietly. "I thought it would hurt to play again." Adrian's expression softened. "You were brave today." "I don't feel brave. That's usually when people are the bravest." he said with a small smile. They walked toward the side of the stage and sat down on a bench. She felt lighter with each passing second. Do you want to talk about it? He asked gently. She shook her head. Maybe later. Right now, I just want to sit. He nodded, respecting her silence. The two sat quietly, watching people walk by. A few children pointed at the piano, excited to see such a shiny instrument. A teenage boy went up to it and played a clumsy but enthusiastic tune. A small group clapped for him. Lena smiled faintly. She had forgotten how music brought people together in small, simple ways. After a while, she turned to Adrian. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For giving me space. For not pushing me. For believing I could do this. He looked at her with genuine warmth. You did it because it was already inside you. I just stood nearby. She let out a small laugh, though her eyes shone a little. They stood after a while and walked toward the mall exit. The evening light spilled in through the large doors. The air felt cool and gentle when they stepped outside. I should head home, Lena said. Do you want company for part of the walk? He asked Dot. She hesitated only a moment before saying yes. They walked side by side, not too close, not too far. The city felt softer than usual. The sky was brushed with soft colors, and street lamps flickered to life. After a few blocks, they reached a small park. Lena slowed her steps. Can we sit for a moment? She asked. Of course. They found an empty bench under a tree. A few kids played on the swings nearby, their laughter drifting toward them. Lena looked up at the branches above. The leaves swayed gently in the breeze. I always thought, she began slowly, that if I played again, the past would come crashing back. All the pressure, the expectations, the mistakes, everything. Adrian listened carefully. But it didn't, she continued. The only thing that came back was me. A part of me I thought I had lost. That part was waiting, he said quietly. She took a deep breath. I'm not ready to perform. I'm not ready for anything big. You don't have to be, he assured her. But she paused, her fingers tapping the bench softly. I think I'd like to play again, slowly, just for myself. Maybe sometimes here, maybe sometimes with you around. I don't know yet. Adrian's smile was gentle, not excited or demanding, just warm. You can take all the time you need. Lena nodded. The quiet moment stretched between them, comfortable and peaceful. After a few minutes, she stood. I should really get home now. I'll walk you the rest of the way, he offered. She didn't object. They continued their walk through the calm streets. When they reached her apartment building, they stopped near the entrance. Thank you for today, she said softly. Thank you for trusting yourself, he replied. She smiled genuinely this time. Without hesitation. Good night, she said. Good night. Lena. She walked up the steps and unlocked her door. Before stepping inside, she looked back once. Adrian was still there, giving a small wave before turning to leave. Lena entered her apartment and closed the door gently behind her. The room felt different, now not fuller, not brighter, but more open somehow. She walked to her bedroom, sat on the edge of her bed, and opened the music book again. Her fingers traced the notes of the first piece. She whispered to herself, I can do this. She didn't mean performing or impressing anyone. She meant reconnecting with her own heart. She placed the book gently on her bedside table. Tonight, she would rest. Tomorrow, maybe she would visit the mall again. Maybe she would play. Or maybe she would just sit at the piano and listen to the quiet. Either way, she knew something for certain. The music inside her hadn't been lost, that it had simply been waiting. And now, step by slow step, she was ready to let it in again.